Happy Thursday, Judy.
Happy Thursday, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing great. Here we are. We're going to be wrapping this up for a while.
I know. I'm excited for you, and I'm also sad that I'm not going to get to see you on a regular basis.
Well, we'll have to figure out a way to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Or we'll just Zoom every other Thursday just to touch base with each other. But, I just felt that it was time. I've done over 900 shows that began when COVID started, and I've started going back to live performing, and the bug bit me hard.
Right.
So
Yes.
I want to put all my energy to all the work that we're doing there. But I'm very excited about today's show because this all began when you suggested bringing on Mark Danni, who's going to be on any second now. But he's the artistic director of TheatreZone in Naples, Florida, where you are. And you also help out at this theater.
Yeah, I volunteer. I'm a bartender most of the time, occasionally an usher, but it's fun, and I love supporting community theater companies. Anything that's theater related is something that I think all of us need to, do our best to make sure it's successful in whatever way necessary. So volunteering is fun.
Absolutely. And most people think when they think theater, obviously they go right to Broadway and they want to get to a Broadway theater. But there are theaters in every town in the country, at least for now there are. And it's important that we support live theater. And I'm very excited to be meeting Mark for the first time. So Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark.
Mark, I want to begin by asking you about the trajectory or the road that led you to being an artistic director. And if you can just give us a little history there.
Well, mine's a little different path because my background started in the music world first as a conducting. My love was conducting. My instrument was drums and percussion. And I loved being in a pit because I worked with the conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra while in college, and I was working on opera productions. But because I could read music, starting at the ripe old age of 15, I used to get hired to play in theatrical pits, and it made extra money. And so I eventually moved to New York City, was working in the Broadway world as a musician. I was on 8 national tours. I was a conductor for Les Misérables for a while. And while I was on the Les Misérables company, the woman in charge of running those companies suggested that I should try directing. She thought I had an eye for it, which I did. And then,
if you don't mind my interrupting, where did she get the idea that you had an eye for this? Was this based on something that you had said to her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Les Misérables would have understudy rehearsals, as does everybody, once a week. But Les Misérables used a conductor for their understudy rehearsals because it was quite complex. And I used to conduct her understudy rehearsals. And then we would go have dinner and stuff before the night show. And I would just start talking about certain things and how things were staged and character development. And she just said, "Have you ever thought about this?" And I actually had not. And I said, "Do you think I'd be?" She goes, "I really think you have an eye for it." So I took the ball and ran and started directing regionally. And then a weird opportunity fell in my lap that I ended up here in Naples, Florida, and was lucky to end up founding an equity theater down here. It's not a community theater. It's an equity professional regional theater down here in Naples, Florida. And we're just finished our 19th season where we launched our 20th season announcement that we're going into next year.
Congratulations. So you've been doing this at the same theater for 20 years.
Yeah, 19.
Wow. Well,
it will be 19. It will be 20. Yeah.
Mark, did you enjoy being on the road?
I did. I enjoyed seeing different cities. I got to go to Scandinavia with a tour of Evita once. My wife, you should know, I met in college, and she's a wonderful actress, singer, dancer, and choreographer. And then we moved to New York together, but we rarely saw each other. She was touring, I was touring. And then it just got to the point where after about 8 years of touring on and off for both of us, we sort of wanted to be in the same room with each other. And that's right around when I was told maybe I should look into directing. She was already choreographing. So that's how we sort of ended up back together finally. And yeah.
How do you select the shows that for each season? What's that process?
Yeah, it's I develop short lists and then shorter lists. What I try to do is if you're a season ticket holder, is I try to give you a variety of genres that you can see. So, what is entertainment to people is different. Some people only like something light and fluffy and funny. Some people want something thought-provoking and dramatic. Some people want something from the golden age, but some people want something more modern. So I start laying out different ideas that I have, and then I start getting them narrowed down, and then I consult with Karen, of course, my wife, and we look at it, and we come up with something that we think is a nice variety. So if you come to see all our shows, you've gotten a good variety of different styles.
Well, Mark, I'm going to say something, and I don't mean this in an offensive way. I have seen, I go to a lot of regional theaters all the time, and I am a subscription holder to many theaters. And some theaters, they find their groove immediately. They know who their audience is, they know what their audience wants, and they're able to give them that. I have also seen, I'll use the Paper Mill Playhouse as a perfect example, which is one of my favorite regional theaters near me. And several years ago, when the preceding artistic director moved on, the artistic director that came in temporarily felt that they wanted to re-educate the audience for the theater.
Yeah.
And when they changed their direction with what they were doing, they lost many of their subscribers until they got back on track with what this audience wants. How long did it take you to find your audience?
Not long, because Florida in general is a retirement state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Naples, Florida was, when I started, primarily a retirement state. So you keep an eye on the demographics. So 20 years ago, I started with a little niche. I don't really use it anymore, but I started with the Lost Treasures of Broadway. When I started here, you have your national tours that are out playing your booking houses. There's a community theater in town, which does your big Oklahomas and stuff like that. And I was trying to find these shows that I thought had huge value, but weren't being done a lot down here. And my first show was Jerry Herman's Mac and Mabel. And I was lucky enough to be able to present what I wanted to do with it to him. I had a connection to him. I went to him. I said, would you mind if I did it with 10 people? I want to do it this way. He was very gracious and said, I'd be happy to have you do it. I was lucky that right before we did our first show ever, he was performing at the with the Naples Philharmonic Orchestra, an evening with Jerry Herman. And he did a lecture. And in his lecture, which he invited me to in front of 350 people, he announced that his favorite music that he ever wrote was to Mac and Mabel. And it's amazing. There's a new Equity Theater in town that's going to be doing. I know you can't write this. And I had flyers available, and we only did 4 performances back then. It was one weekend, and we sold it out on our first try ever. So that was, just
how lucky.
Yes, it was
Jerry Herman.
Yes.
So I just absolutely love him. So moving forward, have you basically kept the same format throughout these 19 years, or is this something that you've experimented with and tried different things? And how much of your season comes from your subscribers with suggestions that they make?
Well, the whole world is pre-COVID and post-COVID, right? So I was keeping an eye on our audience and keeping an eye on who was retiring, keeping an eye on the fact that the Woodstock generation was about to retire, was about to turn 65. And so keeping an eye on in my variety of shows I pick, of starting to find stuff that personnel might want to see, and also keeping my older patrons who like the golden age happy also. When the pandemic hit, because of where we're located, many people moved down here, mostly because our schools were open. We're outdoors. We're not indoor campuses. So they were able to remain open. And there was a lot of younger people. By younger, I mean late 40s, early 50s, with kids who are still in school moving down here. Changed the demographic a little bit. When we came out of the pandemic, and I knew this, I picked a show, for instance, Rock of Ages. I started thinking 80s. Those people love the 80s. It was a huge hit here. So, and you might be aware, there's been some very interesting articles written in the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, about the state of the season ticket holder or the subscriber, or that people are now stopping buying an entire subscription and picking and choosing. So I just saw a statistic yesterday that while we are down season ticket holders 50% of where we were in 2019, we are back to, we just finished our season and have more season ticket buyers than we had in 2019. Makes it hard to plan, but it seems that people are now realizing I don't have to buy a whole season. What we try to do is offer something that you might like to buy the whole season. And it seems that content is a part of it too. Many of those articles have reflected that audiences tend to not want to be preached to anymore. That doesn't mean you can't do a show that has a message. They just don't want to be preached to. They're sick of hearing that or whatever. So it's interesting. And that's from major, theatrical cities and stuff. So I do keep my eye on that. And I listen to my patrons, and I'm at the door every night as they exit, and I say, good night to them. And I hear what they say to me. And I just try to keep an ear to the ground of who's coming, how many new people are coming in, what's attracting the new people to come in. Was it something edgy? Was it an old traditional show? Yeah.
Which show has attracted the youngest audience?
Well, Carrie.
Okay,
Carrie.
Carrie.
Yes.
Okay.
Which was the intention of attracting. I was at once with an older patron, a patron who was in his late 70s. There was an article that was written about the opera world, and would you go see an opera about Game of Thrones? Because opera's just like that. And this patron said, if somebody did an opera on Game of Thrones, I'd go see it. And I'm like, well, so what's going to bring the not normal theater goer in to see theater? And that's one reason why I picked Carrie, because I thought it would attract somebody who might be like, I don't want to see music. What, Carrie? I might go see that. Right. So, yeah.
Mark, in today's market, what do you think is the biggest challenge that you are currently facing as far as your theater is concerned?
I think it is what I was just talking about. Since the subscriptions are no longer a barometer of how popular shows are going to be anymore, you're always looking in the rearview mirror. What did this work? You go back and you say, wow, they all ended up coming to this show, but a lot of it is impulse buying, or a lot of it's waiting to the end. So I think that's the biggest challenge now is trying to understand the audiences, and also how the audiences are getting their information. We were still an old-fashioned city of hard newspapers and stuff, but then again, COVID excelled us into the social media more. So now we're pushing more into social media, and the retirees are using it more.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it is. It is. So again, it's always trying to keep a beat on your audiences and attracting them to you and staying to you. My hope is that you may not like every show I do, but hopefully you walk out saying it was really well done.
That's a good thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Since starting this theater company, what is the biggest change, other than the issue that we've just talked about, subscriptions, the biggest change that you've seen that you absolutely have embraced, and the one change that you still struggle with?
Oh boy, that's a hard one, Richard. The one that I've embraced, I think what I'm embracing and is challenging is keeping an eye on my demographic, as it is a demographic that is always fluctuating, as people, as I say, are retiring and moving here. But now there's also people moving here for different reasons. And so I'm embracing that. I like that there's newer people down here. I like that there's different people down here. It's challenging in the sense that, how do I get them in my door or keep them in my door? What's been hard to embrace is grasping the marketing, because it's so hard to really keep a focus on how people are hearing about you. You just never know. It was a very old-fashioned model. If I ran a full-page ad in the paper and went on to the local elevator music radio station and ran a week of commercials, our ticket sales went through the roof. That is not the demographic anymore. That station doesn't even have that format anymore, thank God. But it was so much easier to know exactly what you needed to do if you really wanted to boost and get the word out. And nowadays, it's really just sort of scrambling with, let's just throw it out to every social media site we can. Let's run a commercial. Let's do this. So that I think is the hardest thing. That's just sort of out there in the world, and we just people come through the door and we're like, thank God. Okay. So.
Well, I want to bring Gary Powers on. Gary has the Revolution Stage Company in Palm Springs. I had the good fortune of appearing there a couple of weeks ago. And he's at the other end of the spectrum from you, Mark. This is a new theater company that he's just getting off the ground. So, Gary, welcome to the show. And I'm thrilled that you're here today. Meet Mark. And of course, you've met Judy before.
Hi,
Thank you
Gary.
for having me. Hey, great, wonderful hearing Mark. I mean, we're going through the same sort of stuff. So I love that.
Well, Gary, I want to ask you the same question that I began with Mark, the trajectory or the road that led you to being in this position that you're in right now.
As you know, I worked in the theater since 1977. I basically, the day I saw Angela Lansbury walking down the aisle of the Valley Forge Music Theater saying, "Anybody who stays home is dead," boom, and the hair went up in the back of my neck. It's as if I die, it won't be from sitting, it'll be from fighting to get up and get out. I knew I wanted to work in the theater. There was a local theater that opened in my hometown. I went to them and said, "Listen, I want to work in the theater. I'll pull the bubble gum off the bottom of the seats. Just give me a job." And they said, "Well, the only thing we have right now is in the box office. Do you want to do that?" And I ended up selling tickets to theater shows for over almost 40 years, the last 20 years on Broadway. As a union member, I have a nice little pension from them right now, so that's good. But I retired out here to Palm Springs 8.5 years ago to get away from the cold weather. And I was, I had been nurtured and fed by seeing 30, 40 Broadway shows a year. And I came out here to Palm Springs, and the quality of the shows that people were seeing out here was not terribly good. And I couldn't figure out why that was. And I would often talk to other performers like, why is the theater not bad? There's so many talented people, but why is the theater not good out here? And this theater space became available. It was former home of the Desert Rose Playhouse. It had been a former nightclub, and we totally renovated. Richard can tell you it's a beautiful, beautiful space. We have 150 seats. We have a liquor license. We have an ice cream bar. We have 2 great dressing rooms backstage, a brand new stage, a giant $10,000 LED screen. But I went around to many of the theater companies in Palm Springs and said, why is the theater so bad? And every single one of them said the same thing. They said, the theater out here is terrible, but we do good work.
That's right. That's right.
They would say,
I want to ask you the same question that Judy asked Mark. How do you decide your season?
Well, we've only been open for 7 months. The first 3 months on our stage, we had 70 performances. Some weeks we have 11 performances. We've had multiple shows at the same time. Some Saturdays, somebody called us an old vaudeville house, because sometimes on Saturdays we'll have a show at 12 noon, a show at 2, a show at 5, a show at 8.
Wow.
And the favorite thing people can say to me out here is, "Oh, you can't do that." And I'll say, "Yeah, watch us." And we do. And we're giving people a lot of different things, but we're learning along the way. We opened in October with the world premiere of a brand new one-person musical no one had ever heard of, at a theater no one knew. In October in Palm Springs, when many of the snowbirds and the tourists were not here yet. So it was probably not the best idea. And the original plan was we were going to develop new work so that it could go on to other places like the Pasadena Playhouse and maybe to, the Old Globe in San Diego, maybe Off-Broadway. We discovered that audiences out here, they don't necessarily want to see new work. And I don't necessarily want to produce another production of Oklahoma or Fiddler on the Roof. Not that they're not wonderful shows, but we want something different. So we've been really finding our way. We had this world premiere of a one-person musical October. We had a world premiere of a musical about homelessness in November. We did Christmas Carol in December. We finally hit our stride in January when we did a production of Avenue Q. Just sold out every performance, mainly because of word of mouth. People constantly, night after night, said, I saw this show on Broadway and your production was better.
Wow.
And we use we're a non-union house. We use all local people. And so that was really what we needed at that point in January, for people to say, like Mark just said, that people come out of our theater and say they're going to give us a chance again and again and again because they do good work. And that's what it's all about. We just did a production of the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. Same thing, rave reviews. But again, a lot of the snowbirds from Canada had left town. So even though it got rave reviews, we didn't sell out. So we're still trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. We're planning our next season and really focused on November through April. So that's where we are.
It's very similar to Naples in that way. Don't you agree, Mark?
Yes, absolutely.
No. You're seasonally focused because your demographic is seasonally focused.
Correct.
So.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, as many times as I've been to Palm Springs, I never think of Palm Springs in terms of snowbirds. But I guess that it's very much a part of that. And, you know, you also have the luxury, Gary, of being, you know, well, a 2-hour drive can end up being 4 hours, as I discovered, from Los Angeles to Palm Springs. But you are in close proximity, and a lot of name artists from the LA area are able to come to Palm Springs. I had the good fortune of having Jason Gra be my special guest in my show. So you've got that luxury of being there. But on any given night, as it was even with our night, there's so many incredible things to go to. And I have a question that I want to ask both of you. I'd like to get your take on this. I'm sure that when you're thinking of your season and putting everything together, that you all these ideas are swirling around. You also have to have blinders on, but you also have to be aware of the fact that there are all these other options. And what's the secret to getting them walking through your front door? And of course, social media has changed a lot. I totally agree. You know, when I started in cabaret in New York, we had ads in the New York Post and the Daily News, and the New York Times had the ABCs of what was going on in town. That's all gone. It's all gone. And when you're sending things out, you don't know who's seeing it and who isn't seeing it anymore because it's so fractured anymore. How do you both deal with that in terms of all that's there, all the other options that are there, or do you even think about them? Gary and then Mark.
Well, fortunately, on my team, we have a lot of younger people in their 20s that know all about social media. So I really, really depend upon them. We do email blast constantly. We just started a campaign where one of the things we haven't focused on at the Revolution is fundraising. As people may know, Richard may know this, but in Palm Springs, and no offense to Mark if you do this at your theater, but I've always hated this thing where people get up before a show and start asking for money, you know, because I'm sitting there in the audience thinking, well, I just bought a ticket to see your show and I'm supporting you. Now you're asking me for more money. And, you know, sometimes in Palm Springs, people will go on for 10, 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting there waiting, you know, you want to see a show, right? And it's like, no. So we don't do that, but we've really started to focus now on fundraising and figuring out how to raise money. And today we actually started a campaign to name the seats in the theater and raised $6,000 this morning, which is a really wonderful thing.
Good for you.
So, right. Yeah. So we're going to continue to do that, but it's, you know, in our theater, we have video monitors inside the theater. We promote all the shows that are going on. There's a street fair in Palm Springs on Thursday nights every week. We have people down there passing out palm cards. And it's really about, you know, people keep coming through the doors and say, oh, we didn't even know you were here. So, but again, within the community of performers, because we've really focused on the sound in our theater, the sound quality is probably the best of any place in Palm Springs. And everybody, performers, singers, they're all coming out of the woodwork because they've heard about the sound in our theater, which
No,
is
it's
so
incredible, absolutely incredible.
Mark, you have a very unique way of raising funds through the restaurant promotion that the theater does.
Yeah, we had found, if you're talking about fundraisers, which I know is a little bit off what you asked, Richard, but throwing big galas and stuff seems to become something that is so much work for such little return when you really go into it. And we just had a very interesting thing where our board went out and got $400 gift certificates to top end restaurants in town. And there's a lot of top end restaurants in this town. And then we raffle off 3 prizes. The lowest is $1,200 worth. And so all I do is I do give a curtain speech every day, but I am with you, Gary. I don't like it to become a carny act. I get up there just so people get to know me. I tell them what's coming up next. And then I do promote very quickly this raffle. And I say, there's a page in your program and you can win this money. And it's brought in it's brought in a decent amount of money each year for didn't have to throw a gala or anything. That has helped us. In terms of your question, Richard, the area I live in, people are looking for something to do every night. Mm-hmm. So luckily, people are always like, there's no competition really on Broadway either. There's a theater next to a theater. People want to see, I don't think many people in this town say I have enough money to go to one show this month. So they want to see different shows. So I'm very lucky in that sense that I feel there might be some competition for donor dollars, but in terms of ticket sales, we're lucky. I do see a drop though in our season when our snowbirds go back. May 1st is a huge, you can finally get through a light one time. You don't have to wait twice and all that stuff. But keeping an eye on the year-rounders is also important because there's more year-rounders down here now.
Well, I was going to ask you, is your theater a year-round theater?
No. At the moment, it is not. We next year we will be going into June, but we don't do our first show until December, and then we just close Sunday. But next year we're going to go through June 12th. Okay. Yeah, but I may venture into the summer. I may very well.
Well, I'm very excited to bring on our next guest. I will tell you how I got to know Evelyn virtually, of course. I was scheduled to perform at a venue in LA. And I hired a stage manager and a tech director. And they called me from the parking lot and they said, you got to get out of this. There's no lighting. There's no sound. There's no staff. You have to bring everything in. And I called the theater and I said, I don't live in LA. I need to find a space. And we were scrambling around to find a space 2 weeks later. I had Joanne Worley and Mary Jo Catlett in the show. And I needed a space. And my dear friend, Barbara Minkus, called Evelyn Rudy before she called me and told her what my plight was. And Evelyn worked out the most incredible deal for me. So I was able to come in, do my show, had a great time at the theater. So Evelyn, this gives me a chance to say thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Everybody that saw the show was just, how did you get him there? What did you do? Did you have to pull strings? So excited to have you.
Thank you. And I'm going to bring up a photograph because you had a very interesting start in this business. Here you are as the Eloise on Playhouse 90. I mean, talk about a start to a career. How did you end up in Santa Monica with the Playhouse? And it's not the Santa Monica Playhouse, it's Santa Monica Playhouse.
Right, exactly. Santa Monica Playhouse, I was very fortunate when I was little that I got to work. And after I got to do Eloise, I was a big star and I worked for quite a long time. And when I turned 15, my parents and I decided it was time to focus on school. My parents said, you can do whatever you want with your life. When you turn 18, you make the decision, but you have to have a school background. You have to have an education. You have to have a degree, and then you can do whatever you want. So by the time I was 18, I was going to UCLA, and there was an ad in the Hollywood Reporter for a workshop. And I had always done classes, dancing and acting and all of that. So we went to this workshop at Santa Monica Playhouse in Santa Monica. and met the artistic director, Ted Roeder, who was, along with James Arness and Eric Braden, the founders of Santa Monica Playhouse in 1960. And yeah, I'm going to join a workshop. So I joined the workshop. This was in 1966. It was the same day I started at UCLA. And it was a great workshop and met a lot of people, and it was lovely. And did some shows with Ted. And then one night, a young man came into the workshop. He was auditing. He was sitting in the back. His name was Chris. It was his first night back from Vietnam. He had been at the Playhouse before I joined. So this was his first night back. And the first place he came was the Playhouse. They were doing the hot seat exercise, which anybody who was around back then knows it was the way you got to your primal self in exercises in theater. You sat in a little chair in the middle of the stage with a little light, and then everybody said horrible things about you. And it wasn't supposed to be horrible. It was supposed to be,
Now
they
that's
were
called
supposed
social
to,
media.
they were supposed to say something they wouldn't ordinarily say. But of course, what they said was, well, you're really not a good actress. And those improvs, they sound like you memorized them. And it was just, it went on and on and on and on. And then Ted, who was running the class, asked the young man in the back, well, you've just come back. Do you have anything to say? And he said, I really and gentle and has the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. Well, that is now my husband of 54 years. We met at the Playhouse in 1973. Ted decided he wanted to retire, so he was going to sell. He just said, yeah, I'm going to sell it to a business of some kind. And it was right after class on a Monday night. And we said, we'll take it. We'll take it. And he said, well, you'll never be able to afford it. We said, we'll take it. We'll take it. Well, it's $10,000. He wasn't obviously selling the building. He was selling the name of the Playhouse. So we scrambled. We had a little repertory company at the time. Who can donate? What can we do? My parents, Chris's parents, everybody else's parents. We scrambled. We got $5,000 in 1 week. And then Ted let us pay off the rest. So on January 12th, 1973, Chris and I became artistic directors of Santa Monica Playhouse. And we've been here ever since.
That's amazing. That's just amazing.
I wanted to run something by you because I think this really relates to what you were just talking about in terms of sitting in that hot seat. Taylor Swift said about Tortured Poets Department, her new album. This is a quote from her. What do we do to our writers and our artists and our creatives? We put them through hell. We watch what they create and then we judge it. We love to watch artists in pain, often to the point where I think sometimes society provokes the pain. And we just watch it happen. I'm wondering if you can relate to that and if all of you can relate to that in some manner.
Listen,
Oh,
very good.
absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things, our main mission when my husband and I first took over the Playhouse, fight against that feeling of criticism. Everything has to be, you go into a class or into a rehearsal and you're constantly afraid you're going to be bombarded with something. So you never feel safe enough to really explore and expand and explode and do whatever you want. So our mission has always been that it's positive reinforcement, positive. And I think over the years, especially in smaller theater, the paradigm has changed. It's become a lot more positive than it was back there in the 70s when it was really so dog eat dog. And so I have to put you down so that I can feel better about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've never understood that in this business. Mark, I want to ask you, how did you find your theater?
When I had moved into being a freelance director, I got hired by the community theater down here had just started hiring outside directors. And I had played Naples on my last tour that I played here. And my wife and I invested in a vacation home. And so then when I went to do this directing, I came down here one day and I interviewed and I said, my wife choreographs and we have a vacation home. And if you fly us here, and so they hired us. Community theater rehearsals a long time, about 6-7 weeks. So we were down here and we had a 6-month-old child. And while I was here, there's a private school here in Naples called the Community School of Naples. And on the campus has a charming little 250-seat theater. Somebody from the school was working on that production as a volunteer assistant stage manager who was in admissions at the school. And he sort of fell in love with us. And he said, you need to create a theater program for my school. And I said, I'm not moving here, but thank you. And he was very persistent, and he had us tour it, and we saw the theater. And it was actually my wife who like woke me up in the middle of the night and said, I think you should go back to that head of the school and tell him you'll start a theater program if he lets you start an equity theater company in residence at that little theater they have on their campus. So I made an appointment. I went back. We discussed how it would work. And I've been here now 22 years. So
Was it difficult starting an equity theater company?
hey, I tell everybody, thank God I didn't know what I was getting into. You know, I was a musician who was a conductor, who was a director, you know, and I'm so glad I didn't. I may have never done it, you know, incorporating nonprofit status, starting, you know, as Gary was saying, I didn't, you know, I have $10. We got to put on a show so people know what we're about. I did not go fundraise at first. I said, how can I fundraise if I don't have a product? And so somebody gave us $1,000. I thought we had made it. And, you know, we brought down Gary Sandy, who was in a TV show called WKRP in Cincinnati.
Yes.
He played our Max
Doing
Sandy.
very well. Yes.
And the luck of Jerry Herman, as I told you about, and the rest is history. But no, I say, you know, ignorance is bliss in that sense. You know, I didn't know what I was getting into in that corporate world, but yeah.
Gary, same thing. I know that you were living in Palm Springs, and the Desert Rose Playhouse was there for years and years and years. Very well-known gay theater company. Was it one of the casualties of COVID?
It was. They had originally been in a space outside town in Rancho Mirage, which is 2 towns over from Palm Springs. In a church, and then they decided to move into this nightclub space, Zelda's nightclub, very famous in Palm Springs, was somewhat decadent. It's sort of like the Kit Clack Club. Somebody once said to me one night at our theater, they said, oh yeah, I came to Zelda's all the time. In fact, I had sex right over there in the corner. And I went, oh. So, but one night at Zelda's, they had there was a fight outside in the parking lot. Somebody got killed, and the city said, we're closing you down. So the guys who were doing the Desert Rose Playhouse moved their theater company down to downtown Palm Springs, which was a great thing. Unfortunately, it was right before the pandemic, and they really struggled. And 2 summers ago, they announced that they didn't want to do it anymore. And after a long time negotiating back and forth, we took over the lease. And I love what Mark just said, because I often say in our team meetings every week, we have such a great reputation after 7 months out here. We've really elevated the quality of work in Palm Springs. But as I say in our team meetings all the time, we are doing incredible things considering we have no idea what we're doing. You know? Because it is, and you know, I had no idea. I moved out here, retired. You know, I spent all day with my 3 dogs, sitting in the house, writing all day and creating things. And then now I'm running a theater, and it is really hard. It is very, very difficult what we do. And I mean, I'm grateful. We had a great fundraiser this past Monday night. Our name is Barbara, celebrating Barbara Streisand. We had all these great performers in the Valley here, and you know, and
it's on Barbara's radar as well. She's very much aware of what's going on there.
It is very much on Barbara's radar, so it's videotaped, and maybe she'll see it. So, but it's difficult. I'm sure Evelyn and Mark both know it can. There's a lot of rewards, but it's a lot of work.
We have a picture in our office that says artistic director, and it's a fireman holding a hose putting out a fire. And that's my wife says, how many fires did you put out today? I mean, I spend my mornings putting out the fires, and I'm sure you all do too. That's really what we do. We take care of the fires.
Speaking of fires, a question for all of you. COVID. What got you through COVID? A lot of theaters, unfortunately, were not able to survive it. What got you through it, number one? And I know we all are. It's still, I feel it's like the little engine that could. Broadway is struggling, trying to recoup that audience that was not there shows are not lasting as long as we thought that they would. What got you through COVID, and what has been the aftermath in terms of trying to get your audience back? Evelyn, I'll start with you.
We very, very fortunately had just about a week before COVID gotten a grant from the Amundsen Foundation to upgrade our technical equipment in one of our theaters. So the day that the lockdown happened, we asked them, can we transition this? It's still equipment, still useful for our live theater, but can we transition to live streaming equipment? And they said, sure, go ahead, do whatever you want. So within a week, we were doing our classes online. We were doing on-demand performances. We were live streaming. We were streaming some of the shows that we had taped in the past. And throughout the lockdown, we became luckily quite proficient at using all of the equipment, so that as we moved out of the lockdown and back into live theater again, we were able to incorporate this. We do classes now that are hybrid. We do live streaming shows. We have a free festival that we do every year, what I understand to be the only completely free fringe festival in the country, where everything is live streamed and live performance at the same time. And we learned so much about the digital world. One of our theaters is now completely set up for projections, so that instead of building sets, we can project everything. Social media, we were Luddites before the lockdown. And like Gary and Mark have said, social media now is where it's at. We used to take ads in the LA Times. That's completely gone. But we have young people who have been with us. Our social media consultants started here when they were 8 years old in one of our conservatory programs. They just celebrated their 40th birthdays, and they are our saviors when it comes to all of the social media and digital, the worlds that we didn't even know existed. So if there was any silver lining at all in COVID, it was that.
Mark?
The Actors Equity Association was a bit of an obstacle during this. They I don't believe they handled this well at all. They basically just said nobody could work. So the first part was that they don't control concerts. So I created in the 2021 season a concert series called the Showstopper Series to create something to keep our doors open that would be safe. We did an hour concert with a theme. Showstoppers at the movies, Showstoppers, the best of Broadway. It was an hour long, no intermission. We checkerboarded the seats. The most you could fit was 100 people. We rarely had 100 people there. We wore masks. We put microphones on the actors. We put on masks. It was a cast of 5. We had a 5-piece band. The reed player had plexiglass around him. We kept people working. People were able to come if they felt safe, and we also live streamed it. Certainly was not making us any money. It's our patrons. We sent a letter out to our patrons and said, as you know, we're struggling. Help us keep our doors open. They came through. They donated. And the final thing that is really, so that helped us moving into the next year. What helped us sort of recover was the SBA grants, the Save Our Stages. That was a huge help. It was a lot of work to put it together, but the payoff was great. It really gave back a lot of money that was completely lost and helped you to breathe a little sigh of relief and keep moving. So those 3 things sort of kept us going.
Okay, Gary?
Well, of course, we did not have a theater during the pandemic. But as I'm sitting here listening to Mark and Evelyn, and one of the things which is really standing out to me is, people in the theater, whenever confronted with a problem, will figure out a way around it, or how to figure it, just figure out how to make it work for them. And just what Mark said, and Evelyn too. I mean, it's, we come to these problems and we don't get stuck, or we don't just like run away. We sit there. I usually get stuck for a couple days, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the worst thing. And then I think, okay, how do I get around here? Mm-hmm. As a playwright in Palm Springs, sitting here writing, I didn't have an opportunity to get a lot of my work on stage. Because people, they wanted to hear Tennessee Williams or Arthur Miller or, Wendy Wasserstein, and I needed to find a way to get my work on stage. And what did I do? I founded a theater. Years ago, as a young man, I would go to Broadway theaters and I wanted to figure out how to get those best seats, for the least amount of money. Well, what did I do? I ended up becoming a ticket seller to solve that problem. But, as I always tell people, especially young people, it's like whatever in my life at the time I thought, oh, this is the worst thing that could happen. Later, when I look back, it's like, oh, this was really the best thing that could happen.
Mhm.
And look what happened during this pandemic. I mean, we wouldn't be here online talking like this without what happened during the pandemic. And during the pandemic, I got to see some incredible theater online from London, from the old Vic and, just different things. So people figured it out. Theater people, especially, they're always going to figure it out. So I feel really gratified to be in this community.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about with all the work that all of you do, and we all respect what you do. None of you are islands. It's surrounding yourself with the best people. And I will say this, Gary, the staff at the Revolution Stage Company, Mariah, I'm in love with. Your entire staff, everyone was wonderful, and they were there to make me feel as welcome as possible. Same thing, Evelyn. I felt just so comfortable at the theater. And Judy, you volunteer, at Mark's TheatreZone. Mark, talk a little bit about those people that lift you up daily, beyond the audiences, but the people that are part of your team.
Yeah, I think what you say is so true. What Gary says is so true. We're problem solvers. As you know, part of my job is working with high school kids, was part of my arrangement here. And the kids in the theater, while several of them do go on to pursue this, the kids that have come back to me have said, boy, I can really think on my feet. Theater gave me the ability to think on your feet. And that is true. Theater people think on their feet and they're problem solvers. And the people I surround myself with are problem solvers. And we have to do it quickly sometimes. We have a limited rehearsal period. You have a limited whatever. So all of a sudden something's not working. We need to be able to keep our cool, look at each other, maybe take a added 5-minute break that wasn't scheduled and say, okay, here's the cards we've been dealt. Let's fix this. We've got 5 minutes. Okay. And we turn around. And those are the people I surround myself with. People can't do that, then they don't last with me. My favorite thing is when cast members who are brought together from all around the country, from New York, from California, from LA, from Florida, they all meet. We only rehearse 9 days, nine rehearsals over 10 days. When they get done and they say, this was a great experience, when people do this for a living and they're doing it everywhere, that's a compliment to me, because that means that they weren't stressed. They weren't under the gun. And somebody once said to me on a show that was very difficult to try to put up in 9 days, and we were still struggling to get it finished before a designer run. And I met a fellow actor in the bathroom, and he said, how are you not just screaming and yelling at everybody? And I said, well, what good is that going to do?
Right.
I must keep my cool. I know we're going to get there. They need to know he seems to be fine. So then we'll be fine. Right. And that's what you have to do. You can't run around and yell at everybody. It's not going to be productive. So those are the people I surround myself with. Those are the actors. That's why I like to have a live audition. Talent is one thing. I want people with a good work ethic, a good attitude, people who are there to realize this is what needs to be done, and not, hey, this dimensions of my dressing room are 4 inches shorter than what the equity rules say. That's, I can't. Yeah. So.
I love the fact that, Gary, you said earlier, problem solvers. You also, as I just said, you've surrounded yourself with an amazing staff of people.
We have, and thank you for mentioning that. We and it hasn't, we bring people in, and we are very dedicated, and we make this clear from the outset. We are a no drama theater company. In the sense, we've worked with people that, came off stage screaming because somebody forgot a line or they messed up and I love what you just said too, Mark, about, listen, I worked on Broadway with Hal Prince and Bob Fosse, and recently I worked with somebody that was just a director that was so calm. And I said, She never yelled. She never got upset. She would say, I like that suggestion. Let's give it a shot. I don't know that's going to work with it. And I said, I love that about you. And she said, but Gary, when you scream and shout, what does that accomplish? It doesn't accomplish anything. So these are all lessons we learned. But yeah, we, we're finding our way with the people that work with us, and we're surrounding us. We have people that come in the organization and it works or it doesn't work. And hopefully that's all part of the learning process too.
It's like in relationships, right? I work with a lot of couples, and screaming and shouting is the last thing that you want to do if you're in a relationship with someone, right?
Well, and a lot of people that work in the theater think because they're in the theater, they have to be dramatic.
Yeah.
And then nobody's listening. Once you're shouting,
That's
nobody's
right.
listening anymore. And that's not
Right.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Evelyn, same thing, with surrounding yourself with the right people.
Exactly. We one of the most wonderful things for us is third and fourth generations of people that have come back and working with us. My grandmother was here, and then my mom was a stage manager, and now I'm here, and I've got a 4-year-old, and I'd like to put her into the program. And it's what Mark was saying too, and Gary, that people come and they say, you changed my life. I took 2 classes in your diversity and education summer conservatory, and it taught me that I can be confident, and it taught me not to be afraid to stand up for myself. And I'm a doctor now. I'm a neurosurgeon, but this theater experience helped me arrange my thoughts. It helped me live my life. And for me, that is so touching. And it's why we do it. I think it's why we all do it. We do it in order to make people's lives better, make them happier, and make them think. If they walk out of the theater, even if they hated the show, even if they thought it was the worst thing they'd ever seen in their lives, nobody ever walks out of a theater without having been changed in some respect and being convinced that they need to think about something. They can agree, they can disagree, but it shakes up something inside. And to me, that's really what theater's all about.
Absolutely.
It's so true. I just want to say with Evelyn, we get the occasional grumpy person who doesn't like their seat or whatever. And when I talk to audiences, I say, we are entertainers. What we want more than anything is for you to have had a good experience. If you don't, it wasn't our intention. And we take that personally. So please know that our job and where our chemistry is to please you. That's why we do this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that's a lesson in life as well. I mean, you go into a restaurant, the food doesn't come out to your liking or something. I don't think that your waiter went out of their, or waitress went out of their way to make sure that you had a bad experience at that restaurant. And from someone who has waited tables and been on both sides, I am one of the best tippers around, if I do say so myself, because I know what it's like to walk in their shoes. And I feel the same thing. What can I do to make it better? I just interviewed Larry Luckenbill. He has an incredible new book out called Affected Memories. And I interviewed him on Monday. And he said he went and spoke in front of these kids. They were kids to him at the time. And he said, how many of you come from dysfunctional families? And he said a couple of hands slowly went up. And they looked around to make sure that other people were raising their hands. And he said, the rest of you are liars. So, and it had me from that moment. But I'm going to ask a question of each of you, and I'm going to put you on the spot. And then at the end of the show, we're all going to have a moment to have our final word, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the question that I want to ask of each of you, and don't be shy, is what makes you uniquely you when it comes to your theater company? And I'll start with you, Mark.
I can answer that because people have told me this. My uniqueness is my understanding of, we only do musical theater, my understanding of music. I've been told by people, they don't know many directors who sit there with the script and the score and are talking about in the music is when this should happen on measure 38 with the music director. And I guess that's something that I only know because that's all I know is how to do it that way. But so I consider that an asset that while the director choreographer is something I envy, at least I married a choreographer. I think it's unique that my passion for music and music and theater, and that what I think is some of the most dramatic thing is when you merge music. I just don't talk about singing, I'm talking about underscoring and all that. When you can get that to be correct, that's when magic happens. And I think that's something unique about me. I don't know that many music directors and musicians went into the field of directing. So I thank people for pointing that out to me.
No, that's great. I saw a cabaret show last night, and I'm going to point her out, Claudine Jellison. One of the best evenings I have spent in the theater. I'm in tears for most of the show, happy tears and sad tears. And I said to the director who was sitting next to me afterwards, this was perfection because of the underscoring and all of those elements that he brought to it. It wasn't just her walking out, telling a story and singing a song. It was everything, the lighting, everything just came together. And it was this alchemy that made it such a great evening. So Claudine, if you're watching, incredible show last night. Gary, same question for you. What makes you uniquely you when it comes to your theater company?
I mean, I keep telling people that everything in my life has led me to this point. I didn't plan on being the artistic director, the founder of this theater. But, you know, when I was 24 years old, I walked up to John Kander in Boston and said, listen, I'm a student and I want to learn how you develop musicals. And he said to me, meet me tomorrow morning at the hotel and for breakfast and I'll tell you. And we did that for 6 weeks. I had a master class from John Kander in the development of musicals. I studied with Mylan Stitt, who ran Circle Rep in New York City, who wrote The Runner Stumbles. And I just, you know, I have just always like, tell me, learn constantly. Reading things, you know, I'm amazed a lot of times when I meet people that work in the theater and I say, who's your favorite playwright? And they're like, it's like, you got to be reading plays and learning and seeing as much as you can. And, you know, if you see 30, 40 Broadway shows a year, you're probably going to figure out what's really good and what isn't. So I bring a lot of that experience to this, and I announce myself as a Broadway snob very proudly.
Great. Evelyn, same question.
I think at least what people say to me mostly is I was fortunate enough as I was growing up and studying and learning and working to be able to learn all aspects of theater, which is what we teach and what our repertoire company does. Writing, directing, producing, selling tickets, cleaning the toilets, sewing, composing, all of it. I think I'm probably more a jack of all trades and master of none. But with my love for theater and my husband's love for theater, the two of us together try to create a home where people can learn all the edges and all the aspects of theater. And so we can turn on a dime if we have to. We can create a play in a day if we have to. And all of our company members are learning the same way to present theater. So I think I'm proud of that for myself.
That's wonderful. Judy, anything you want to ask or say before we do our final statements today?
Yeah, I think all three of you do, you know, remarkable work on a daily basis, right? You know, you're just churning out all this creativity and inspiring other people, the people that work with you, to do their best. And that's something, you know, to be really proud of. And the proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? You do great shows. So, and other people see that too. So I think that's something to be really proud of.
That's great. I'm going to give my final statement, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Mark, and then you, Gary, Evelyn, and then Judy, you'll have the final word today. When I started doing this series, and then Judy came into my life, which I'm grateful for, very much so. One of the great things about sitting here is that I get a chance to speak with artists in every realm, and you're all artists in what you do. And, you know, I was very, very fortunate, as everybody who knows me knows, that I was very dear friends with Carol Channing. That's her behind me. And Carol's husband, when she married him late in life, she was a newlywed at 81 years of age. He was not from the theater. He learned very quickly what it was like to be thrust into the world of Carol Channing, of all people, and what that was like. But he had such a love for the arts. And for the last 20 years of her life and the last 10 years of his life, they fought to bring arts into education. They had a foundation for the arts, which I was fortunate enough to be on their board. And one of the things that Harry always used to say, that if kids are not exposed to music and the arts, they won't know the difference between a microphone and a xylophone. And it's very important with everything that we do that we not only share our knowledge with other people, but to just get it out there. I've had the same message at the end of all my shows, and I'm going to say this again. Go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Treat them to a live show. And everyone, including everyone here, we're all on Facebook. After today's show, everyone who's watching, whether you're watching it now or later, go out and go to your Facebook friends list and reach out to the 8th name that pops up and reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, but a phone call. And let that person know the impact that they've made on your life. And by doing so, you're going to make an impact on their life. I have a dear friend, Sean Moniger, and he says we're all in the same storm, but we're in different size boats. And I always say, I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you have a skipper by your side. And with that, I'm going to leave the screen. And Mark, I'm turning it over to you.
Well, thanks. That's a great message, Richard. And I agree with you. There are people who've taught me and brought me to where I am now. And I feel it's my job to pass on what they've given me to generations. I'm lucky enough that I work with high school kids daily. I'm also very happy that we work with the local university, providing workforce experience for them. They work on our productions, behind the scenes, spotlight operators and all that. And I would just say to everybody out there, there's nothing like live. And take a risk. Don't go see a show you've never heard of before. Don't just go see the old war horses. Go take a risk. Go see something live. Go see something new, and enjoy the wonderful experiences of live entertainment, whether it be a concert, cabaret, theater, play, musical, anything. There's nothing like having the performer right in front of you performing. So I would say that.
You know, live is where it's at. Thank you, Mark. Evelyn?
I think something that I learned when I was very, very little, and that is probably our mantra at the Playhouse, is live theater is a necessity, not a luxury in our lives. It is a necessity for social change. It's a necessity for human interaction. It's a necessity not because I want to be a big star or because I'm going to make a movie and everybody's going to see me. It's a necessity because it's the people's voice. And it is a place where people can interact, where they can learn, where they can grow. Students, adult students, we have programs for adults that have never acted before. And they're not going to become stars. They don't want to become actors, but they become fuller and richer human beings with a fuller life. So yes, go see a live show. Bring a friend to see a live show. There is absolutely nothing like it.
Thank you, Evelyn. Gary?
Well, I couldn't agree more with what both of them just said. I always go back to that day that I was sitting at, the Valley Forge Music Fair, and Angela Lansbury walked down that aisle, and I was like, I have to do this. And when I came out to Palm Springs, I went to one of the local theaters, one of the big theaters. There were lots of empty seats, and I said, why don't you make these seats available to people on low income? And basically their response was, if you can't afford to go to the theater, you shouldn't go to the theater. So, and we're really focused on changing that. We're starting a DNA program out here called Develop New Audiences, because there's nothing better when you expose live performance to people who've never been there, whether they're 8 years old or 80. There's just something about it. And God, how fortunate I am that I'm able to do that on some small part.
And as a former ticket seller, you know that you can't put a price on that.
Absolutely not. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Gary. So this is our last show together, at least for a while. I'm hoping maybe Richard will change his mind down the road. But, I want to give him a proper send-off, because it's been an incredible experience for me to be able to do these shows with him. And He'll be coming to a theater near you, so make sure you go see him. Brene Brown says, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. So Richard, I salute you for embracing exactly who you are. Thank you, everyone.